In recent years, the pace of innovation in cycling has increased exponentially. inCycle's been behind the scenes to find out how top pro teams marry the latest tech to something that hasn't evolved quite as quickly, the human body. In part one of a series on biomechanics, we chat to one of Trek Factory Racing's master fit specialists, Phil Cavell.
The human body never evolved to ride a bike, and it's been largely assumed that the bike and the body fit together automatically, but actually they don't.
At the top level, an extra few watts here or there can make the difference between the podium and a minor placing. With that in mind, most teams on the World Tour spend an increasing amount of time before each season dialing in rider positions and ensuring their bodies are supple and strong.
Athletes are expecting, in all sports, and that's of course cycling as well, much more of their bodies. They're asking of their bodies much more. So athletes are now generally much better conditioned. Certainly the Trek Factory Racing guys, they are all over strength and conditioning and Pilates and all the stuff they should be all over. Whereas back in the 60s and 70s, get to the bottom of a Vontu and you swig a bottle of brandy.
Indeed, the importance given to bike fitting and strength and conditioning are relatively recent. Before then, even the greatest of them all had issues that might just have been resolved with the aid of modern techniques.
Merckx, for example, is somebody who was plagued by issues through his career after an accident he had in 1969. And some of those may have been difficult to resolve with bike fitting, but some of them I think were pretty elementary and could have been resolved by bike fitting. If you read Merckx's story, here's a man who kind of was plagued by issues which we would probably find fairly easy to close off now and remove that doubt from his mind.
Thankfully for Merckx and his peers, they rode at a time when the frame design was radically different, meaning a far less aggressive position on the bike. A couple of decades later, all that changed forever with the advent of the compact frame.
So in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, people would routinely ride their bikes in much more conservative positions because they didn't have the data, they didn't have the preparation, they didn't have all the... So their bodies were in a very sort of safe position. They weren't extremely positioned on their bikes. The 90s changed that with the advent of a headset. Suddenly the bars dropped, body's conditioning didn't change, and then things started to pop. Riders were riding around with routinely 12, 13, 14 centimetres of drop down from the saddle to the handlebars. Now, what happened? What changed in their spinal profile or in their flexibility at that time? Absolutely nothing. So riders, athletes just had to suck up this massive adaptation. And in some senses they didn't do that, and a lot of riders broke around that time because suddenly their handlebars were so low in proportion to their saddle. Their spines were under massive tension, which again wasn't factored in biomechanically.
To make matters worse for riders, clipless pedals arrived around the same time.
Clipless pedals is a huge one in the industry because it was a massive biomechanical shift for the riders that was completely under the radar. They'd used for years they'd used the trap pedals with a strap, and all of a sudden in 2 seasons they were having their feet literally fixed into this plate into a pedal, and that was a biomechanical shift in the way their whole bodies adjusted, completely under the radar.
This era of technical innovation coincided with a changing of the guard as well. Riders from North America began to make their mark, and the new kids from the new continent brought with them some fresh ideas, namely experimenting with bike fit.
Early pioneers, I guess you'd have to say all the Americans really, Andy Hampston, Lance, Greg LeMond, they were very early into this, I would say. But most riders had issues which they could never actually thoroughly sort of close the loop. They were always there nagging at their mind. So in that sense, bike fitting was on the map as a negative. They wanted to resolve these issues but couldn't.
And so from a situation where individual riders sought out top bike fitters, times have changed to where we are today. Bike fitting is an integral part of team training camps before the new season each year, and the technology employed is all the more impressive.
It's become less of an art and more of a science in many ways because of the technology. Now, especially when we're working with Trek Factory Racing, the technology we work with those guys, with the pressure mapping and the fast camera motion capture and all the foot control stuff we do, bike fitting is going to change in 2 ways. It already is. It's going to become very, very technical. Massive. It's an arms race of technology right now. Some of which I like, and some of which I think, okay, well, it's okay to have an arms race, but no point in producing guns if you don't teach people how to shoot them properly.
Next week on inCycle, just how Trek Factory Racing are looking to be pioneers in their approach to this year's Tour de France.